So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Jeremiah Smith, who is President and CEO of SimpleTiger. Hey, Jeremiah, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Adrian. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
You're very welcome. Now, Jeremiah, for the benefit of our listeners and readers, can you tell us a little bit about you, a bit about SimpleTiger, and a bit about the work that you do?
Sure, yeah. So I'm an entrepreneur. Accidentally discovered that about myself, as I'm sure many others have done. And I started SimpleTiger about 12 years ago. We are a search engine optimization focused digital marketing agency. So that is the service that we focus on. Mm-hmm. And the clientele we tend to work for are software as a service companies. So that's SimpleTiger. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's pretty much who I am and who my company is.
Fantastic. Now, some people might be listening to the intro to this and thinking, yeah, but this kind of podcast is normally about service and experience and engagement and all those sort of things. And sometimes it's also we have a tendency to focus on larger kind of firms. But when we started talking about this podcast a few weeks ago and we were exploring areas that we could talk about, the thing that I said to you, I remember, was that I also like telling stories about small companies that are doing, I think, just cool things in the way that they operate and they work with their people and their customers and so on and so forth. So when we were talking, you mentioned your management style and how your organization runs on or is based on these three principles like mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And I was thinking, hang on, that sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I just wanted to say, that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. It's like, wow, that sounds familiar. It's like, can you explain to us first kind of this mastery, autonomy, and purpose, the inspiration behind it, and what has compelled you to look for, like, as you're going to, I guess, explain a different way of doing things?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, the familiarity comes from Daniel Pink's book, Drive. Mm-hmm. And then he summarized that book in a TED Talk called, I think something along the lines of Unlocking Motivation or something like that.
Right.
But fantastic TED Talk for anyone out there interested. But the whole concept of mastery, autonomy, purpose comes from him in his book. So I have to credit him there. Yeah. And I have to credit several different sources for the development of what we call the MAP management methodology. Mm-hmm. It's something that we've kind of over time Frankensteined together here at SimpleTiger, and it's just been absolutely fantastic. It's really been a helpful thing for us. Now, describing those elements, mastery, autonomy, and purpose, really it starts with purpose. Mm-hmm. In my idea or in my mind, I think it starts with purpose, which is that every organization has a single intended purpose. And then within that organization, it's made up of people, and each person in that organization has a single intended purpose. It could be a team, it could be a single individual. And once you're clear about that, it makes it very easy to understand what your job ought to be, what it ought to do. And it sets a nice, elegant path forward for where you're going. So that's the first step. The second step is to give everyone within the organization autonomy. Now, this is critical because everybody has different ways of achieving certain purposes. You know, if you and I are each assigned a single purpose, you might go left and I might go right, but at the end of the day, we may both achieve that purpose perfectly.
Right.
But only if we're both given autonomy. You know, the old methodology of control is quite different. That comes perhaps from the Industrial Revolution and things like that, where there was no room for error. There was no room for creativity. We had, machines that had to work a certain way. And so there was no way that you could be creative in those areas. So autonomy is much more fitted, less for the Industrial Revolution, and I'd say more so for the information age, what we live in now.
Okay.
Where we have this influx of information and people have so many different ways of achieving the same thing. So that's where autonomy comes into play. And then mastery is the final element that I think really sets it all up for success. Mastery is the vested interest the organization takes in the skill development and the overall performance improvement and education of the members of that organization. So equipping them with whatever tools they need, giving them allowances to spend on educational material, whether that be books, conferences, online courses, university courses, even things like that. So any kind of organizational investment that is made into the skill improvement of the members of the organization fall into that mastery bucket.
Fantastic. And I mean, so I recognize these ideas from Dan Pink and these book and these work and things, and they've been around for a while. But I mean, can you explain to us a bit about what compelled you to look for a different way of doing things? Because it's quite a radical departure from many kind of organizations, or the way that many organizations work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what first compelled me was that he started off by highlighting that the financial incentive model of problem solving actually yielded worse results.
Okay.
And the larger the financial incentive, the worse the results were. Now, this is for problem solving. Okay.
Right.
So it's critical that I make that distinction, because there are other areas where a larger financial incentive actually drives improved performance, perhaps maybe in the sales arena and in marketing performance, things like that, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But the idea that actually drove worse results really got me thinking, because, like you mentioned in the intro here, we are a small company. At the moment, I think we've got 6 full-time employees. So we're not a huge organization, but we do work with some very large companies, and we make some very massive movement and impact happen for them. Now, the way that we do that is because we equip the entire team with single purposes. So everyone on the team has a single purpose, including myself. Everyone has autonomy and mastery as well, and we invest in everyone's education. But to kind of get back to your question, I think what really stuck out to me was that since we're a small organization, offering a large financial incentive is probably going to be a difficult thing for us, honestly.
Right.
For critical problem solving for a little while, until we get to the right size where that's not quite a difficulty. So when I heard that, I was like, oh, okay. So he got my attention. And then he laid out this methodology. And when he got to the point on autonomy, he really got my attention. And he got my attention on that because I had previously worked for over 20-something companies in my career, and as an employee, and I've worked at large marketing agencies and small marketing agencies. And I remember the best experiences at personal development in business for me came when I was given a certain level of autonomy, and I was treated more so like an adult and less like a child that had to follow all these rules, right? And so when I heard that, it immediately resonated with me, and it was something that I was already giving my team, but now I had a word for it, and now I had something that I could actually intentionally offer them, as opposed to just accidentally letting them have. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, I think it reminds me, it makes me think about two things. One is that it's almost this approach allows you to, if you like, stay small but really punch above your weight, so you get the most out of people in the organization as working as a collective.
Right.
But it also reminds me of I was doing a bit of work with a client yesterday, actually, and one of the questions I was having, we were talking about leadership and stuff, and one of the questions I asked was like, I said to them, describe to me the best boss you've ever had, and why they were the best boss, and what made them stand out. And I was thinking about that myself, and then it occurred to me that my best boss was somebody that I worked for, kind of probably nearly 20 years ago, and a gentleman by the name of Hisham Fahmy. And it was wonderful because he turned around and said to me, when I started working for him, he just turned around and said, "You see the job description?" He said, "Yeah, so it doesn't really apply to you. Don't stick to it. It says, I know what you're capable of. Just go off and do stuff that you think that will matter and have an impact on our organization, but just keep me in the loop."
Gosh,
and I was a bit like,
I love that.
Oh my God.
You found gold.
I was like that. And then for the next 2 years, we were like smashing it out of the park. Just like working with, not doing things alone, finding the right people, getting things started, keeping things kind of moving, bringing in skills where we didn't have the right sort of skills, and so on and so forth. And it was just, I think that, I'm still in touch with him, and the guy stands tall in my memory when it comes to sort of experience of actually kind of being an employee, just because of the way he is. He's a credible gentleman.
I love that. I totally agree with that. I know what you mean, and I have memories of past bosses and things like that were a lot the same way. That was just they definitely contrasted against everything else I was used to.
Yeah. So I see one of the things I also find kind of really, really interesting about your approach is because I know it was inspired by Dan Pink's work. What's fascinating is that we see a lot of these different sort of management ideas floating around, but actually it's kind of seldom that we actually hear about stories that where people have taken them and turned them into working practice. And this is kind of one of right at the very heart of kind of why I wanted to talk to you, was to get your take on how you've turned it into working practice. So can you explain to me how these three elements sort of translate into a day-to-day practice and sort of how they differ, from more traditional practices? Because I think that's where the rubber hits the road, if that's the right turn of phrase.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you. So I think some real world examples of this at play within our organization. I've got some within our organization and then some with other organizations as well. First of all, purpose. I think purpose gives, speaking abstractly here, purpose gives people the clarity to understand their work and what's expected of them in a way that nothing else can. And a purpose, I genuinely believe, if you can distill it into as few words as possible, that is the less words, the more ideal. And that just gives you clarity and takes away any kind of misinterpretation of what your job role is and what your intended purpose at the company is. So within our company, for example, we have, three different major departments, really. We have technical, we have content, and we have offsite, which is also kind of like PR. I guess you could think of PR.
Sure.
When it comes to content, for example, my content manager, the role there and the purpose there is to produce the highest quality content for our clients. And it has to be strategically produced and things like that. So all that is nested under the term quality.
Right.
But when we discuss that, and we hire someone who's going to be a content manager, for example, really the term is produce high quality content. So that's really all it needs to be. And what that did for us at the time that we started instituting MAP, originally this person was in charge of just managing content writers, but she wasn't actually in charge of strategically coming up with campaign ideas for the client's content. Someone else was in charge of that, and they would hand that strategic idea over to her, and then she would make sure that everything gets doled out properly and manage the flow of it.
Right.
And I realized a major disconnect there because the person who's developing the strategy doesn't actually know what it's like to implement that content on the ground, doesn't know what it's like to strategically and tactically develop that content and have it land on the client site in a way that will help the overall purpose that we're trying to serve as an agency for our client.
Sure.
Quite like the person who's actually managing the content. And right now I'm speaking about Caitlin. She is our content manager. And so we had a discussion and I said, look, what I'd like to do is consolidate all content responsibility onto you. And I know that's a lot of responsibility I'm giving you. And I know that's probably going to come with a higher workload. So I want you to just be honest with me and let me know when things get difficult or when you have too much work or whatever. But I, at the same time, want to give you autonomy over that and let you know that I want you to make the decisions about the content for our clients. I'm not going to tell you what to do. And my brother and partner, Sean, he's not going to tell you what to do in regards to client content. Now, we have years of experience doing this. So in the mastery bucket, I'm going to give you some tips and some advice and some things that I would recommend you try. But this is just educational material. You don't have to do it this way. And ever since giving that tour, we just kind of erased the slate of the process that we had before for managing that content and said, here, you write your methodology for how we're going to produce content for clients. And right away, the very first content strategy she produced had one of the most heavy-hitting single content strategy pieces in it for a client that would have slipped right under my radar. I would have never caught it. And I have 12 years experience doing this. And so I was like, see there is gold in these hills. And so I was absolutely ecstatic. And we're presenting that to the client here shortly. And I'm so excited to see what they think about it, because I know in my heart of hearts that that's going to be one of the best things they could possibly do. But that would have never happened if we controlled how she came to the content strategy conclusion for that client. So that's a real world example of all three of those at play.
Perfect. And when you kind of implemented this type of approach, because it's quite a big shift in terms of, things were kind of uncoupled, but now you've just kind of like, actually, we're just going to roll them all up together and go, there you go, have at it. And we're going to help you, take responsibility for it, but we're going to support you so you can, develop your own level of mastery, so you can grow within the role and things. But that's quite a big shift from where you were before, and also where many other agencies or other organizations and how they work. So how did you manage the switch from one thing to another? That's a bit Jekyll and Hyde. Did you try and pilot it in an area or with some people, or did you just go, right, we're gonna change?
Yeah,
like wholesale?
That's a great question, and that's honestly going to be the biggest question to answer for every organization listening, for anyone listening here. To start with, we already at our core kind of had a little bit of the DNA of what we eventually called MAP and these three concepts. We kind of already had that running through our blood, but we just didn't define it clearly. So to a degree, there was a strong hint of all of these in what we were already doing. So that made, quote unquote, switching to it officially easier, right? Now, for a traditional organization that does not have this happening, there is going to be a phasing process. There are going to be all kinds of challenges in terms of switching to it. And I'm not naive to that whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I've gone to great lengths to write out all the challenges that we've experienced, and even some challenges that I could perceive other organizations might experience that we haven't necessarily run through. But part of it is switching to this kind of has to happen in a wholesale way. It's going to be difficult to do with just a few members of the company or with certain levels of the company. I could see maybe if you are a massive organization, like, for example, Best Buy, they're really forward thinking in a lot of their management practices all the way down. But I could see something like this starting at the corporate level before ever making it down to the retail level. Right. And I feel like that would actually kind of be necessary, just so that they could make sure that it's actually going to work at the corporate level. But regardless, the idea of giving some people autonomy and not giving other people autonomy can create tension, can create frustrations between people. It can actually create a little bit of a train wreck, because you'll have some people who are completely free to do whatever and others who are having to follow certain rules. And then the same goes for like a purpose. If I give you a very clear purpose, but then I do not give a very clear purpose to someone working next to you, there may be some overlap, and they may be doing a little bit of your work. And then when you are saying, wait, this is my intended purpose, plus I have autonomy, that means I have decision-making power over this rule or this area, you could see how tension could form and problems could arise. So I think doing it in any kind of way other than a wholesale switch is going to be difficult. Now, that said, when you do this wholesale switch, all kinds of problems are going to erupt, because you're going to realize you don't necessarily know how to give someone a clear purpose. You don't necessarily know how to give someone absolute autonomy, because you've been operating under a different paradigm for so long that you're immediately going to tell them what to do. And that's just natural. That's just what's going to happen. And we've fallen on that many, many times. And I've actually equipped my team by telling them, listen, guys, I want you to know that each one of us, all of our purposes, not a single one of our purposes is more important or valuable to this organization than the other. So, and you're being given autonomy, meaning you have decision-making power in your realm and to achieve your purpose. Now, as I'm rolling this out, if I overstep the bounds and I start trying to control or push my opinion in an area or something like that too hard, I want you to blow the whistle and say, hey, let's look at our Constitution,
Right.
because then it's not personal. They don't have to make it personal. They can just point to the Constitution that I instituted.
Right.
They can point to the rule book that I'm espousing and say, Jeremiah, you're not following this rule, right? And so I encourage that, and my team has been super forgiving and lenient about it. They don't push me hardly at all in that regard. But I caught myself yesterday in the midst of telling one of our PR manager, I had a really strong idea that we should do this, and then I realized, wait a second, what do you think? And he said, honestly, I think we should do that. And pointed another direction. And I was like, okay, why? And he drew that out. And I was like, you know what? Why am I going back to this old method of trying to tell you what to do? You know exactly what to do. I completely trust you. Let's do whatever you want because I love what you just came up with. It totally makes sense. I'm going to let go of this. This is yours. So, and he was like, thank you so much. This is why I love working here. And I was like, oh, perfect. So,
that's brilliant. Do you think, you talked about challenges and stuff, and through the implementation, is it the main challenge just breaking the habit of how you do things, or are there more challenges than that?
That's definitely the main challenge, at least for I see this being the case, at least for leadership,
right,
to begin with. I think the team members who are actually going to be, utilizing this in their own respective areas are immediately going to be able to dive into it. I think part of the struggle is also for them is going to come at the mastery level,
right?
Learning when they've hit their knowledge limit and where to go for further information.
Right.
What I love about this, though, is that it sets up the expectation that continuing education is a constant.
Right.
So we want to continually improve, and in kind of the words of Edward Deming, we want constant innovation. Mm-hmm. We should always be taking wherever we got to yesterday, we should pick it up and improve it today. And continue doing that. And mastery gives you the chance to do that. But I would say that the old habits are the largest challenge because everyone's got some habits in here ultimately. For example, we have a sales rep that we call a client concierge, and we call it a client concierge because that title means that really your job is to usher someone through the process of sales that we've got set up, and it works really, really well when you usher them through that process. So the whole idea there helps make sense of that role.
Sure.
But we've found that Ashley, who is our client concierge, she'll run into a situation where she's developed a really good relationship with a client and then closes the client into a project and then is supposed to hand the client off to an account manager, basically someone we call a client coach, because their job is to kind of coach the client through the process of implementing what we recommend. But when that transfer happens, Ashley loves the client. She misses them. So she still stays in touch. And to a degree, she kind of does a little bit of account management work. And so it's hard for us because at times I have to say, Ashley, I really need you focused on the new business. But at the same time, I completely understand why you're still talking to them because you care about them. You've developed a good relationship with them. And quite frankly, that leads to a better relationship with our business. And so you see how there's a challenge there. It can create, and so there are going to be some areas where you're just going to have to let go of certain things and just, part of her autonomy is like, I'm going to let you do that. But regardless, at the end of the day, if new sales don't come in, we're going to be in trouble, right?
Yeah.
So long as you're closing new sales, I don't mind if you keep up with existing clients. That's fine, right?
Excellent. And so what have you seen as being some of the sort of big benefits? On both sides of the coin, let's say, from a client perspective, in terms of the service and experience that you deliver to them and how happy they are, and also on the flip side, kind of like how your team have responded to this and how it's impacted their, productivity, satisfaction, happiness, engagement, all of that good stuff.
Yeah. So my single purpose at SimpleTiger, I feel like, I'm president and CEO. I'm largest shareholder. Of course, it's a company, so it's got to make a profit. So you could say there are all kinds of purposes nested in there, but really there isn't a purpose. There are things that have to happen.
Yeah.
But there is no purpose implied by any of that. The largest single purpose that I've discovered running this organization is that my teams overall happiness is my single purpose. If I can make everyone within my organization happy and keep them happy with their job, with their work life, in every way that I can, then that's my single purpose.
Right.
And I've seen that when I invest in that, it takes care of my clients because they're happy and they can make decisions to help our clients. So really, I think the largest benefit from this has been that as I've focused more and more on that and made sure to push this out and to try to keep it on track as a methodology and not allow myself to fall back into the old methods as much as possible, I've actually seen my employees' happiness really increase. I've seen everyone kind of come together, and it seems like morale is really running smoothly in the midst of, quite frankly, some very stressful, frustrating work situations at times because of the nature of what we do.
Sure.
And I get very, very few complaints about difficulties or anything like that because everyone has a clear intended purpose. Everyone is allowed to come up with whatever decision they want in terms of how to proceed forward. And usually what I find myself doing most of the time in terms of dealing with obstacles or challenges or things like that with the team is just educating. They come to me when they run into a limit and they say, look, I'm bumping my head on this. What do you think? And that is something I truly love because I've got years of experience doing this and I love teaching it. So when my team comes to me and asks for help on that kind of stuff, if I don't know it, I point to some very good resources where I would go to learn it. But if I do know it, of course, I just teach them. So I think the largest benefits have been overall, first of all, employee retention has been outstanding.
Right.
That's been incredible. But everyone's overall happiness has been so good that I'm sure if we looked at the metrics and everything and kind of the underlying numbers, we would see much better performance per person at our organization than we would a lot of other digital marketing agencies around the world that don't use a methodology like this.
Perfect. That's great. So if somebody's listening to this, like they're an exec, a leader, an entrepreneur like yourself, and they're thinking, yeah, I want some of that. I want to kind of learn the ways of Jeremiah. I mean, where would you recommend kind of they start? I mean, what should they begin with? What should they be thinking about?
So in terms of implementation and in the write-up that I've done for this MAP management methodology, I started with why, and that comes specifically from Simon Sinek's book of the same title, Start with Why. And he also did a TED Talk, just like Daniel Pink did, summarizing his book. And I think it's so pervasive. You'll see it everywhere. Everyone's talking about it and has been for a really long time. But it's so critically true. Start with why. If you figure out why your organization exists, then immediately a decision-making protocol erupts. And you're able to see whenever you run into a fork in the road, which, by the way, building a business means running through fork after fork after fork and taking the right path as much as possible. That's what that is. Sure. It's a lot of decision making. So if you have figured out your purpose and your why before you really get too far down the road, then when you get to those forks in the road, you can intuitively choose the right path immediately. And of course, you're going to take the wrong path sometimes. But the single purpose, figuring out the purpose for your organization and then making that very clear throughout the entire organization. And then at every level of the organization, getting clear about what individual teams' purposes are. Maybe groups have purposes, and then maybe individuals within each group have an intended purpose. And doing it at that level, I think, is the critical place to begin. Autonomy and mastery can come later, right? Because they kind of are informed by the purpose, if you think about it. Like if I just gave you autonomy, but I didn't tell you what needed to be done, well, then it wouldn't matter what you did with all that free time.
Sure.
And that's a problem. If I gave you, if I start developing your education, but I don't know what to develop your education in, then it doesn't matter what I teach you. And that's a waste of money and time. So starting with purpose, starting with your why is the first place everyone should start.
Perfect. And I mean, I know that you were saying you're kind of learning about this all of the time. I mean, are there other companies out there that you're seeing that you're thinking, yeah, I'm keeping an eye on them because I'm learning from them and they're teaching me, and then I'm sort of absorbing that and then building that into our approach. I mean, what sort of other companies are you kind of watching and thinking, actually, yeah, no, I like kind of what they're doing, and I'm going to kind of keep a track of what they're doing.
Sure. Yeah. So the obvious one for us, being a search engine optimization company, is Google, right? So they've always had like their 20% time where engineers are allowed to work on anything, doesn't matter. And they get to take resources from Google and go work on it. They can work with people. They can work together in teams and just spend 20% of their time developing whatever they want. And Gmail actually came out of that.
Right.
So did Google News. And these are two really strong products of Google's, right? And that came out of just giving them freedom to do whatever they want. Just kind of like Caitlin producing this incredible content strategy for a client that had I had control over that, we would have never discovered, right? Another organization I look at that I really enjoy and a mentor that I look up to is Tony Hsieh, the CEO of Zappos.
Yeah.
So he has really worked autonomy into the blood of Zappos, and I think it's really awesome to see what happens. I mean, he talks about the importance of control over one's happiness. You give someone a certain level of control, a high level of control, and then happiness is sort of up to them. Really, you don't have to control happiness anymore.
Sure.
Because it's actually quite hard to control everyone's happiness.
Yeah, well, that's kind of true. I've actually visited Zappos in Las Vegas and met some of their people. I don't know if you've ever been kind of down there or not.
I haven't.
But I would highly recommend it because you meet some of their people and they're just rock stars. They really are. I mean,
that's awesome.
They just kind of, they love the company. They love what they do. They just kind of get it, sort of thing. It's kind of it just feels like a good place to be around. I'm due to go back to Vegas at some point this year, so I'm going to try and pop in again and see them. Going to get another dose of Zappos-ness.
That's awesome. I'll actually be in Vegas late April for MicroConf, and so I'm definitely going to have to go swing by there and check them out.
Yeah, no, so you can do this thing, and this is something if anybody's listening in and happens to be in Vegas. So Zappos has got this sister company called Zappos Insights, and if you look them up, they run tours of Zappos.
No way.
Yeah. You book yourself in on a tour, and they'll take you around, and you get to meet all the people and see all the kind of stuff, and it's like it's awesome. And it costs about like $10 or something to go on a tour.
Done. I'm going. That'd be the best $10 ever spent.
Yeah, I mean, it may have gone up, so don't quote me on that. But I tell you what, it's whatever it was. If it's 10 or it's 100, it's worth it. It's because it's just an awesome place to visit.
Awesome. That's great.
So anyway, I know you're a busy guy, but just a couple of final questions. So, is there anything that we've missed out that you'd like to highlight about this map kind of approach, this map philosophy?
Well, I've got a couple of things that I'd like to state real quickly about concrete resources for people to look into a little more if they'd like to, if they think this all sounds well and good, but I'd really like to know where this little tiny agency in some little corner of the U.S. got this idea to do this. And I don't want to just trust them. I want to trust better resources. So I'd like to just quickly name a few of the resources that we used for the inspiration for this methodology, so that people can go study that and look into them a little further themselves. So I already mentioned Drive by Daniel Pink and Start With Why by Simon Sinek. But another wonderful book is called Turn the Ship Around by L. David Marquette, who was a lieutenant naval officer, U.S. Navy, and did some incredible stuff with the worst performing naval ship in U.S. history, and basically turn it into the best performing naval ship in U.S. history. So that book is incredible, and he uses this exact methodology, except he calls it something else. Right. So I would look into that. It's an amazing book. And then a second book that I would have everyone look at is called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Yeah. It really lays out a communication protocol, which I think really helps implement MAP better. So that, for example, when you're rolling this out, I want my employees to call me out when I'm not honoring the system here.
Sure.
But if I don't make it clear that I want them to be very candid with me and treat me like like I'm right next to them, then it won't work as well. Then they're gonna kind of subdue some of their opinions and their thoughts and everything because I'm their manager. But I don't want them to think about it like that. I want them to communicate with me. We're going to thrive off that communication. So I'd have everyone check out those 2 books. And then last but not least, a previous employee of ours actually helped build this framework for us. And his name's Thomas Honeyman. He's fantastic developer and just all around good business guy. And he helped put together this whole methodology and kind of through a lot of discussions with myself, laid it out in written form and turned it into something concrete that we could begin implementing. So I want to give him credit for that. But all in all, I think that covers just about everything that I have for this for now.
Fantastic. I mean, I will make sure we get all those kind of like people pointed in the right direction, if they, particularly if they're just reading the highlights. But my final question, Jeremiah, that I always ask at the end of these podcasts is this. Is there anything that you would like to shamelessly plug?
Well, I guess the obvious would be our agency, SimpleTiger. So again, I said it at the beginning, I'll say it at the end here. We're an SEO agency, so we do search engine optimization, and we specifically target software as a service companies. We just love working with software companies. They get what we do. The communication's easy. They understand us, and it really just comes down to trust, which with my 12 years experience in this industry and a lot of happy clients is something that's fairly easy for me to establish with our clients. So if you're a software company in need of SEO, I'd say get in touch with us. But really, that's the only thing I've got to shamelessly plug there. So I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Jeremiah, first of all, I'll make sure we get all that linked up and give you guys at SimpleTiger a big shout out to the work that you're doing and the pioneering a different way of building an agency that punches way above its weight just through the way that it sort of works with its people, which I think is pretty inspiring stuff. So I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your story and your experiences with us today. That's been awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adrian. I appreciate all the kind words, and I just love being able to be featured here on your podcast. I've listened to several episodes. You've got an amazing podcast here. You've got some really big names, and so I'm just truly humbled and honored to have been featured on your show. So I thank you for that.
It's my pleasure, Jeremiah.
Awesome. Have a great day. Thank you, sir.